Hi, everyone. I'm David Butler. I'm at the University of Tennessee. If you were in the previous session, I talked about the alley cropping study that we're doing at the University of Tennessee. And with our most recent grant, we also have 4 on-farm sites where we have growers that are developing their own type of alley cropping system to fit within their given production system. And so today we have Taylor Malone, who's one of our growers that's working with us on the project. And he's working with hazelnuts. There was a lot of interest with the one slide of hazelnuts that I had shown in the last session. So Taylor's going to talk to us a little bit about what he's designing and some of his thoughts on alley cropping system, and then we're going to have a panel after that, okay? Taylor?
All right, so I think I have 5 minutes here, so I'm just going to fly through. We're just going to hit the high points. Do I just press this button to move forward? Oh, there it goes. Okay, so I'm going to be talking about hazelnut, silvopasture, and alley cropping. I've been trialing and managing various fruit and nut trees for a little over 10 years now. And this is a little bit of an experiment for me working with these hazelnuts. I have grown some American hazelnuts in the past, but we're going to be talking about primarily the European hazelnut and a hybrid hazelnut as well. So we run a farm school. That's what I do full time on our farm. And so really a big part of what I do is education and doing lots of things. So in this picture, I was teaching our kids how to graft. And we grafted hybrid persimmons onto some field sprouts. In particular, this one's called Nikita's Gift, which I think is an amazing persimmon. But the kids have helped with this project. And to be honest, this project is being grant funded, and I am not really trying to I don't know if this is going to be a moneymaker. So just putting that caveat out there. Our farm is pretty topographically varied. We've got patchwork of field and forest. So I've been rotationally grazing Dexter Mashona crosses to try and improve our soil health. Pretty bad soil, historically grown in corn and tobacco and too many big Black Angus cows. So this is our field. It's a south-facing field that we are currently planting with the hazelnuts. It's not like a great overview, but at least it gives you a little bit of a picture. More of the field is kind of towards us in the picture as well. So that you may know, chickens originally came from the red jungle fowl of Southeast Asia. They are kind of a forest edge species. And of course, nowadays, either chickens are grown in buildings or they're grown in the pasture poultry. And so I think a lot about what about kind of their evolutionary history and what kind of environment are they really adapted to? And we have a lot of red-tailed hawks on our farm, and we have a small chicken flock right now, and we have lost birds to red-tailed hawks. I don't know if anyone's familiar with tree crops. This is an amazing book about growing trees for animals, growing fruits and nuts for animals, and thinking about different kinds of systems. This came out of the Dust Bowl and the massive erosion that happened in Tennessee. And I really don't have time to go into this, so I'm just going to skip. So I am basing my system off of the work of a guy named Reginaldo Haslett-Marroquin in Minnesota, and he has a whole training on this. He calls it regenerative poultry. But basically, as you can see here, not only are we doing alley cropping, we've got hazelnuts and corn, but we also have chickens in the system. And so we're thinking about predator protection. We're thinking about the fact that hazelnuts can use a lot of nitrogen, which of course chickens produce. And we're thinking about shade for the chickens as well. And then we're thinking about producing food crops. So in my context, I am trialing the latest and greatest, and we're going to see how they do. These are the European hazelnuts released by Rutgers University. So we have an American hazelnut, and there is a fungus that is essentially symbiotic with the American hazelnut known as Eastern filbert blight. And historically, all efforts to grow the European hazelnut east of the Mississippi have failed due to the Eastern filbert blight. So they've been working and doing breeding for about 20 years now. We're going to see if they work, if they truly are blight tolerant. But the main impetus for using the European hazelnut is a larger nut size. The American hazelnut just has a pretty small nut. Whereas Reggie is actually using hybrid hazelnuts in his system. So that's just something to think about. I think, yeah, you can ask me questions later. So this is my orchard design. So we got our perimeter fence around the outside. We have the chicken coop in the top middle. And then they have 2 pastures that you can rotate back and forth between. In this scenario, there's a lot of issues with pollination in hazelnuts, so that's determining some of my spacing, but we've got seedling pollinizers. Those are hybrid hazelnuts across the top and across the bottom to create a pollen cloud. And then we've got our clonal European hazelnuts in the center on wider spacings, and some of those are also actually hybrids as well. And then I don't have it in here, but basically the alley cropping is going to be happening on those 20-foot alleys during establishment of the orchard. So it will be a successional alley crop. Eventually, the canopy is going to close. There's not going to be enough sunlight. But going back to Reggie's picture, sorry, too far. Not good at this, sorry. Corn. So I'm thinking a lot about corn, I'm thinking about sunflowers, I'm thinking about grain sorghum. And his system is really for broilers, and he's really got it dialed in. I'm doing egg layers, so I've got a lot of figuring out to do, because he's got a lot more flexibility with timing when he introduces the broilers, and then when he brings in a new batch, they're smaller birds, whereas I'm gonna be overwintering layers. So, maybe I can have corn stalks over the winter, still providing protection in these first couple of years when the hazelnuts are still small. How much time do I have? 0 minutes. Okay, I'm done. Planting with a towable auger. I'm using like a rubber mat. Just cut a hole out of it and it catches all the dirt. Flag it. I'm using cages. Yeah, nothing that cool. You guys. Thank you.
No, that was good, and we're going to hear more about this here in a minute. Anyway, and you see what we're doing. We're just giving folks a few minutes to set the stage. Next up, let's talk to Routt, who runs Grandview Farms in LaRue County, Kentucky. He's got some elderberry stuff going on, and take 5 minutes and tell us about it.
Vote up your hand in 5 or 4.5. Yeah, so don't have anything prepared at all, but as Jody said, my name is Routt. Grandview Farm is located in LaRue County, which is about an hour and 25, hour and a half southwest of here. So my educational background, I'm a graduate of University of Kentucky in their Biosystems and Agricultural Engineering Department. Professionally, I'm an engineer working in ecosystem restoration. Fortunately, through that market, I am working every day with biologists, and coming from the farming background with an appreciation for conservation, being around those guys just really cultivated a much deeper foundation of curiosity and knowledge into our natural systems and all the plant stuff. And so that has kind of blossomed and grown in me. I've always, for some reason, I'm gonna say it was a God thing, I've always had an affinity for elderberry for some reason. And so whenever I had this opportunity to do an alley cropping demonstration plot, I was like, man, I'm gonna do something with elderberries. And so Grandview Farm, we are honey producers, we are fresh cut flower producers, we are native wildflower seed producers, and we're also elderberry producers. And so with this elderberry row cropping or alley cropping, we wanted the elderberry as a primary crop, but we knew that our production may be limited our first year or two. Our ground where we're at is very fertile ground. Crop leases are anywhere between $200 and $300 per acre, so this crop needed to pay, and I did not want to be waiting 2 or 3 years in order to start seeing good income off of that quarter acre. So by having alley cropping with flower species that would both produce cut flowers as well as seed production for native seed production was the avenue that we took. Do we have things that we would do differently? Yes, and I hope that you guys ask those questions of us once we get up into the panel. And so really we did, so we've got, it's on a quarter acre, 2/10 of an acre. We did 9 rows of elderberry. We did Bob Gordon in 8 of those rows, and then 1 row is Adams. And then we have about 9 different species of native wildflowers and some introduced flowers growing in the alleyways. And so I look forward to your all's questions and getting to discuss some of that more. Thank you.
I think I've known Oaks for a long time. I think that's the shortest amount of time I've ever heard him talk about anything in his life. Anyway, I can mess with him like that. Next up, we have Brian Shobe. Brian is in Estill County, Kentucky, and he works with Echo Hollow Farm. They also have an elderberry project that's been started. Can you come up here and give us just talk about it for a minute?
Don't need that. All right, that was impressive. So I'm the other end of that, where I've never been to college. I didn't have a garden before 6 years ago. I'm a plumbing contractor who hurt himself on the job and decided I had to retire. So I grew up in a little town, and it was too expensive to move back to that town. So we started looking around the country, and we found this place. I will say I never sat on a tractor before 6 years ago, and I bought 180 acres. So yeah, there was a huge learning curve. What I did learn, though, was that the people before me just basically played the land out. So there was nothing. They made hay and they ran their horses on it, and that was about it. And if I wanted to get any kind of education, it wasn't going to be from them. So I started to expand and look for people to talk to who would know what I needed to do to improve the soil and maybe one day make the farm profitable. So we were very lucky that we hooked up with KSU and started our alley cropping. My wife and I run the farm, and she works, so it's just me. I take advice. I'm really good about not being stubborn. You tell me what to do, I'm gonna do it. So we took 1/3 of an acre, and right now we planted the first half. We did 4 rows of elderberry, 2 Bob Gordon, and 2 of Adams. And they've done fairly well. I'm really, surprised. KSU, of course, came out and led the way and did most of the work, but I monitor them like they're my babies because I want to be successful. The other rows that we interspersed, this planting season, we only had time to do bell peppers, but we're planning on doing some, and we did a cover crop of buckwheat, which was nice. Reason being is I have bees, and I'm expanding my bees, and I cut it and actually got 2 nectar runs with that. But the next year when we expand and fill out the entire 1/3 of an acre, we're going to also include yellow squash and pumpkins. Part of the reason for the pumpkins, in my opinion, was to keep the weeds down because I'm constantly mowing and fighting weeds. Now, I do work with a lot of other government agencies, so I've managed to take the whole farm and get professional advice on what to do. And it's coming back and it looks beautiful. And I'm very excited about the elderberries. Once I was introduced to them, I started reading books and watching videos, and people seem to love this plant. I know it's ancient, elderberry, but people really do. I can see just by you guys here. It's a fascinating plant. I feel like there's certain sections of the world where everybody knows that this is wonderful, and there's certain sections of the world like this where it's, they're feeling it out. But I feel like since it's such an established plant, I think it was a wonderful plant to start with. And maybe I'll be back next year and tell you how things are going. Thank you.
All right, we're going to let them get comfortable. So the way the rest of this is going to run, David and I came up with a few questions. You guys are going to share the mic, and I'm just going to go in turn. Some of the questions are going to be addressed to everyone, and then some will be addressed to specific people. But please, if I don't address a question to you and you have something to say about it, please do. Keep in mind, though, that this is a panel, and we want to get a good bit of content, so it's probably best not to spend 10 minutes answering. And I'm sure you won't. I just have to say that. You know, I talk a lot. I talk more than anybody in this room, I guarantee it. So I have to watch. I know how that works. But at the same time, if you have a question, Harper is going to bring a mic to you if you have a question. You don't have to wait for a turn. We're here for you. We're here for them, and we're here for you, not me and my questions. Everybody good with that? All right, so y'all ready to get started? Is that mic working? Taylor, I think you're up first, actually.
Test. Yeah, evidently Brian thinks that me and Taylor smell funny.
I'm gonna ask our first question. Once again, y'all jump in. And Taylor, this is gonna be addressed to you first. Yep. Things going on. Was your project easy to incorporate into your existing operation, or were there significant changes you needed to make to establish an alley cropping system?
I think that probably the most challenging thing is just that our soil is so bad, and I wanted more time to improve it with rotational grazing, and it's just such heavy clay, so I worry about my trees' long-term health, and I'm going to try and do a lot of like organic matter incorporation on the top. But I think, yeah, just like literally the physical act of planting into our heavy clay soil it's a job, you know, and I wish the soil was better quality. So I guess that would be the main thing. But it was basically just an open field. Getting irrigation up there is going to be fun.
Was there anything different about it being like integrated with multiple crops in one place? Like, you know, hazelnuts and grains, corn, those things together that was extra challenging? Or did you see anything significant about that?
Kind of like I said, I still am figuring out how to do it with egg layers. And I think that's going to be a challenge, and I still haven't figured out how to do it. Particularly like, how do I raise corn without the chickens destroying it? So when you saw that one picture, I'm thinking about like maybe subdividing those paddocks into maybe even more paddocks using maybe like temporary electric fence or something, and then they're, you know, constrained to a smaller area for maybe a longer period of time in the spring, so that I can get and then maybe it's 4 sections instead of just 2. So that's been something I've been thinking about, and if anyone has ideas, I'm open-minded.
All right, Brian, got a question for you next. Can you tell us again how large your installation is? And tell us a little bit about, does its size fit the time you have available to manage it? And do you have any plans for expansion or reduction?
Okay, so we're on exactly 1/3 of an acre. And if it had come at a different time, it would not have worked for me. There was just so much to do, it being a horse farm previous and haymaking farm, and kind of abandoned. There was a lot of just getting stuff up off the ground, you know, getting things out of the way. Again, buying equipment, learning how to run the equipment and not kill yourself. But for what you guys planned, and you know, it worked out perfectly. It's also priority. You know, I prioritize that, because that's a positive thing, and it's not like just mowing grass. So we've already planned to expand, and we're looking into different varieties. Our farm is very strange in that it's divided in half by a creek. The north half of it is dry, like 5.5 pH. South side is wet with like a 7.5 pH. But the elderberry is supposed to grow virtually everywhere like that. So we're planning on just doing some experimentation before we do row cropping. But this is just, it's working out perfectly, really, the way you guys set it up with the landscape fabric. We spaced the rows wide enough that I can get one of my mowing decks in there, so I'm not weed eating for hours and hours and hours. Did I miss anything about that? I mean, I wish we did more. And yes, I mean, whatever time it takes from me, is time well spent, in my opinion.
Yeah, thanks. And one of the things, just to add a little context too, that was a discussion we had early on, was it's really easy to bite off more than you can chew, right? We've all done that 100 times, unfortunately. I've broken lots of things for that reason, right? And gave it that trial first year of maintenance and things like that, and we talked the other day, and you'd mentioned that very thing. You're looking at expanding. Yeah.
Yeah, I tend to mother things. So I'm trying to pull back from that, just like being down there all the time, making sure every single thing is perfect with them. So I think what we have is probably good, and that way, once it gets established, I'll feel more comfortable with expanding the project.
Cool. All right, Oaks.
Before you ask me that question, so we run around 80 honeybee colonies. We have 2 acres that are intensely managed for the cut flowers as well as seed production, and then I do a lot of wild collection as well. We have 3 sons that are 9, 6, and 5, and I still work a full-time consulting engineering job. I did not baby our plants, and that's the beauty of the elderberry, since it is native here. And so it's not something that you absolutely have to necessarily baby. They will produce better if you do, but you don't have to. But I will say, as far as expanding, this is something you certainly want to start small scale, because when it is time to either harvest your flowers or your berries, the processing that has to take place and the labor intensity of it, you will get behind. It's short term, it's a very fragile berry. It has to come off that plant when it's ready and get in cold storage soon. So definitely start small. Your question, sir.
Good, thank you for that. Yeah, y'all keep that good stuff coming. So, and that's a good segue too, at least from the first part of your comment. Your project was designed to incorporate ecological resources using native seed crops and different types of cut flowers. Have you noticed yet any positive effects of using native plants, or any significant effects on expected financial return from those things?
2 drastically different questions that I will try to answer, and if I don't, you let me know. But nothing scientifically provable. Everything is just from my observations, but by using those native flowering plants. I mean, one of our native wildflowers that we incorporated was Culver's root, and the genetic source for this Culver's root is out of Ohio, I believe. Sorry, that's not even important for this conversation, but anyways, I have one picture of one single stem of Culver's root. It flowered that first year, and so we were able to get cut flowers and money production off of that flower its first year, and some seed production. And on one stem, there is 4 or 6 bumblebees on that one stem, and we've got a 160-foot length plot, and there is 3 rows of it in there. So it and the other natives attracted our native pollinators so heavily that it has not just an impact on that elderberry plot, but our entire farm, right? From a honeybee production standpoint, honeybees aren't native here. They would do much better if we had a bunch of stuff from Europe growing, but I'm not doing that. So from a honeybee perspective, I had read published information that honeybees will not pollinate elderberries. I seen publications that said that they would. I had my fingers crossed. River Hills Harvest, where we purchased our stock from, said, oh yeah, they do. But they might have been looking out for the best interest in their product that they're trying to sell. So I was very happy in late June when we started having our blooms. And it took a little bit, and I started to doubt that our honeybees would pollinate the elderberries. But once they started, it was incredible, the hum that we had in that 2/10 of an acre, and I visually watched them packing pollen away. I don't know what the nutritional analysis would be for that pollen, but any pollen is better than no pollen. And if anybody here keeps honeybees in Kentucky, typically once we get into that early July through July period, we start to get into that dearth. And so all those native plants and that elderberry continuously having that pollen resource was incredible for us ecologically. From a monetary standpoint, as I said, that Culver's root, my wife was able to harvest cut flowers from those. They're a wonderful cut flower with some good vase life. We were able to get seed production off of it. We had some Sweet William in there. So just from some of those early seed producing crops, I would say that, so our first year, we just got done with our first harvest. So we're just right at a year ahead of you, Brian, I believe. We got our first harvest. It was 450 pounds off of 2/10 of an acre. You could say that a good retail price would be $8 a pound for that, right? So that's $3,600 off of that 2/10 of an acre. That's gross income. Let's not start talking about the labor because it reduces. But we should see closer to 800 pounds of production maybe in the next 2 years off of that 2/10 of an acre. So of that $3,600 in gross income, I would say that from our seed production and flower sales, we probably got close to half that again. So we increased our revenue, off of that plot by another 50% in that first year.
Thank you. Taylor, you've answered part of this already, but I'll give you a chance to expand on it. In your operation, is there a more important component in regard to the hazelnuts versus the poultry, or is the alley cropping installation at a stage where they're starting to integrate, where they're both, where that's hard to say? Does that make sense?
This might preclude the question. I'm still planting the trees. So is that
Just expand on then, if that's the case, what your main goals are then. Is the hazelnut trial more important, or is the poultry operation more important, and how are you thinking about that long term?
I'm pretty obsessed with fruit and nut trees, so I'm most excited about the hazelnuts. Yeah.
What will the relative value of the poultry play into this long term? Is it always going to be way down there and the hazelnuts way up here, or do you see that as becoming? Do you see that those relative values changing for you?
Yeah, I mean, for the kids, just having a bunch of we have a really diverse flock of layers, and it's just a lot of fun for the kids. So just having all kinds of crazy colored chickens out there is fun. And eating farm fresh eggs is fun, and just being able to send families home with the eggs is fun. So I think that is really important. And I do think that their fertilization is important. I don't know how much they're really going to be managing pests of the hazelnuts. I know in my experience with my American hazelnuts, brown marmorated stink bug is an issue. I don't know if chickens do anything about those. David says probably not. Yeah.
Two different, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Are you talking about stink bugs?
Mm-hmm.
I've had success We have a flock of about 20 chickens currently, and have had a big stink bug issue. If I have the time to pick them all up and then go feed them to the chickens, they'll eat them. We have Buckeyes, so I'm not sure if that's true for every breed of chicken, but they seem to love them, and I kind of shake the bag that I have them in, so it's kind of become a learned behavior for them. But yeah, we've had some success with it.
So yeah, maybe if I just go through and shake the bushes every once in a while, they'll have a little snack come down. The other thing, I've got a friend, and one of the things he hypothesized about was that I really am interested in wildlife and stuff. And this is only a half acre of our farm, but that seems like wildlife and domestic livestock kind of avoid each other a little bit. And so I wonder if the chickens might kind of keep the squirrels or the blue jays or the crows a little bit at bay. I'm not saying they're going to like fight them off necessarily, but maybe they're less likely to come into the, which is going to be a huge issue with the hazelnuts is squirrels and blue jays and crows. We definitely have plenty of those. So maybe the chickens will be really important for that as well.
Hi, I have a poultry hazelnut question. So since you have the mic, I'm curious, I know you're just planting the trees, but I'm curious if you already know your intended market for the hazelnuts or if that's still to be determined. And then with that, if there's any potential contamination issue with poultry in the hazelnuts, I know with like crop livestock integration, you have to remove them and not have any manure prior to a harvest. Hazelnuts maybe because they're in the shell. I don't know if that's an issue. But yeah, are you considering like having to take the poultry completely out of the alley crop system around harvest for any reason?
Yeah, that's a great point. So in pecans, I could be wrong and someone may know, but they got a FSMA exemption. And of course, I'm totally not regulated by FSMA because I'm tiny. And I think I should still do good agricultural practices, which means washing and like sterilizing the nuts while they're in the shell, which is what pecan growers do. The other thing that might be an advantage of the trees that Reggie's growing, the hybrids, is that you actually harvest them in the husk off the tree, whereas the Europeans do fall free onto the ground. So there is an advantage there as well from a food safety perspective. So yeah, I mean, we have a lot of crunchy moms who, we have about 100 families that come through the farm, every week. So that's kind of my target audience for sales, and honestly, the kids will annihilate them too. They freaking love them. I mean, we bring out the nutcracker and the nuts every week, and I forage pecans and I grow the American hazelnuts and I let them crack those. So the kids are gonna probably eat a bunch of them too. Yeah. So I don't know. I'm open to hearing. I mean, maybe that's an irresponsible plan. Is to maybe I should have thought more about that in terms of like different hazelnut. And actually, in terms of like different hazelnuts have different drop dates, and so maybe on my thing I could have split it in half and done like early drops and later drops. So that's a great point, but I think that just washing and sterilizing is enough. I mean, it's a pretty solid shell. I don't think that poop's getting through that shell, so I think it's okay.
Let's go ahead and take 5 minutes just for questions from y'all. If y'all others have questions, please just raise your hand and you'll get a mic brought to you.
For the hazelnut growers, have you all investigated growing truffles on your hazelnut roots?
I have not. I know some people that do that nearby, and it does seem like that's becoming a more legitimate enterprise. Janine Davis at North Carolina State University is doing a lot of work with that. Mine are not inoculated. You can't buy these inoculated currently, as far as I know. The Rutgers ones, I don't know that anyone's offering that.
Oregon and Washington State?
Yeah.
Because they're doing a lot of stuff there with that. And you said you had a field that was very high pH?
That was him.
Oh, your high pH sites where you want to do that. Yeah.
Nice.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
This is an elderberry question. So you've harvested your elderberries? Then what?
Okay, so our harvest process is we cut them off at the cyme and they go into a plastic tote, say a 27-gallon tote. And so it takes me about an hour and a half each time. I'm harvesting every other morning or so. No, ma'am, I'm not picking those berries off, because we've done that in the past with wild harvests where you cut the cyme, and the best way to do that if you're going to do small, very small scale, I'm talking about just a couple grocery bags of it, right, is to put the whole thing in the deep freeze and let them become completely frozen, and then you can get that cyme out and you can shake it and most of your ripe berries will fall off. Can't do that for 450 pounds of berries, and so we have a commercially available destemmer, and so from the field they go in the tote, they immediately go into a cooler around 36, 37 degrees, hold them there, and then try to get them processed within 24 to 36 hours. And by process, I mean just de-stemming. And so they come straight out of the cooler, they go in that de-stemmer, and then so the berries go into a basket, and we run those through a sanitization process. So they go through sanitizer. You can screen off the green berries that float, any stems, bugs, leaves, that sort of thing. And then they go into 2 rinse cycles. And then from there, they're drained and they're put in 4-gallon food grade buckets and immediately into the deep freezer. Once they're in a deep freezer, you really don't want them to stay frozen for more than 4 to 5 months, maybe 6, to really retain that nutrition. And so we're actually taking those out and we're freeze drying them to where they provide longer term storage and nutritional value.
So do you suggest freeze drying over dehydrating?
Yes, ma'am, I do, because it's not exposed to the heat that the dehydrating period typically is. And even if you do low heat dehydration, those berries are exposed for a long time until they get to the moisture content that they're safe. Whereas that freeze drying process, it freezes them and pulls that moisture out, so you retain more of that nutrition value to it.
We have another question up here in the front. All right. Any other questions? We got a couple minutes. We can, before we jump back into panel questions. In the back.
So, have you ever thought about maybe freeze drying the elderberries and then turn them into a powder? Anyone, by chance?
Yes. I mean, that's something, and especially since we're honey producers, a lot of folks ask for infused honey, and elderberries are really good one to infuse in the honey. So elderberries do have a small seed in them, and that kind of complicates that process a little bit. It's better if you're going to create that powders to first turn the elderberries into a juice. And so you're removing the seed as well as the skin on the seed. And that's an additional process that we may look towards if we start having more berries than we can market as just straight up freeze dried elderberries. It's another that I think would be super simple because it infuses into honey very easily.
Do you know the amount of production years you get out of the cultivars?
River Hills has production of Bob Gordon, I believe, that's been in for well over 10 years. And so since, I think we're looking at a minimum of 15 years for that single planting.
You got me thinking about, is that like a spray dryer that would do that?
Very good question. They have discovered through trial and error. I was so fortunate to tie into a gentleman in Missouri that's all he does is a freeze drying business, and he does most of River Hills Harvest freeze drying of their elderberries. And it has been a huge process of trial and error for him to figure out how to do it without the insane expense of a spray dryer. But they're able to, they know how to produce their juice. And then he's got it down to a science where it's the exact right level within the trays of the freeze dryer that it produces a good product.
And would you talk about do you own a freeze dryer?
Yeah, we purchased freeze dryer in March of 23. Yep, so we purchased a Harvest Right XL. Whenever I was talking with them in February about the purchase of it, you could only do around, I think it was like 20 pounds of product in their current large version. And so I was looking at purchasing 2, thinking about the volume of stuff that I needed to get through. And he said, I can't tell you right now, but in 2 weeks, don't buy anything, wait 2 weeks, I'm gonna contact you. And they had just come out with their XL. And so it actually worked out really nice because within a 4-gallon pail, I'm getting 20 to 25 pounds of berries in that pail. I can freeze dry. It fits great in the trays, about 20 to 25 pounds of elderberries in that machine now. And so I'm able to do a full cycle on one 4-gallon bucket. And so it works out really nice for my processing.
We'll move on to a couple of these, and we'll give you a chance to do this again in a few minutes.
Great, thanks. Curious more about the elderberries again. Could you quickly describe what kind of nutrient management you need to do, as well as pruning management on sort of like an annual basis for the shrubs?
Okay, so from a nutrient management standpoint, that's one thing I'm a little bit nervous about, and going into our second year, I really don't want to be putting a lot of synthetic fertilizers down, and that's one thing that I am really hopeful with us having the alley cropping and having a diverse alley cropping with our wildflowers in between, that I honestly would rather see my production be slightly reduced. Again, I'm on really good soils, okay? So I'd rather see me get slightly different reduction in yield and overall gross income than I would be putting synthetic fertilizers there. So that's something that we're going to be looking at as we move forward, is how is our yield comparing, and we're going to be taking soil tests. What's it recommending? Is it really deficient? Because these native elderberries are so good at growing just native, right? One thing, so, and this ties into the pruning. We will be coppicing here within the next week. I would have done it in the past 2 weeks, but we've been extremely cold. So we will cut them off flush with the ground to where we just have primal cane. And so I'm not leaving those last year's branches on the ground to reincorporate those nutrients, because I am too nervous about the potential for it to have disease or viruses there, and I don't want to keep that cycling through. Also, for our native wildflowers, we try to leave them as long as we can, because there's a lot of native pollinators that reproduce and overwinter in those stems. However, when we get to spring, we're going to have to remove that off of our plastic. And so I'm wondering, what is that impact going to be to my nutrient cycling within that 0.2 of an acre?
Annually, or like every 2-3 years?
Annually, yes. So for American elderberries, you coppice every year. Yes, ma'am.
Can you sell any of those cuttings?
I have a tremendous. So I can. That's not a patented variety yet necessarily, and the wife and I were looking out there and calculating. There's quite a bit of gross income that's sitting there. But as I mentioned my schedule earlier, it's just like, I don't need one more thing right now. We would also, we're looking into it, but we believe you would still need a nursery license, even though it's not a rooted plant, and so they would need to be inspected and to have certified stock. But extremely valuable. Cuttings off of Bob Gordon, Adams, those, they're very expensive. Oh yeah, so within my background, we do a lot of live cuttings and stakings on stuff, and elderberry root readily.
All right. Well, let's move on to a couple more questions. We'll give you a chance to do this again in a second. Brian, you're doing elderberries. You're doing vegetable crops. Is there one of these you care about more than the other? Are you excited about one more than the other? Or are you even focused on anything like that at this point?
I didn't think I'd ever have anything but a garden for my wife. So a few years ago, the local extension office, we went there and they were selling blueberries, raspberries. So we started by planting blueberries and raspberries, and I learned a lot from failure. I mean, really, I did plant 6 elderberries. I got 1 to grow. I thought, oh, I am awesome. And then I ran over it with the tractor. And so, yeah. And then I was over putting something in the shed, and I looked to my left, and there's a 10-foot elderberry growing there that I'd never seen before. So I figured, maybe I should start looking into that. Our blueberries aren't doing that great. Raspberries aren't doing that great. the elderberry is the primary crop, and we just went and got the domain name for our farm, which is Beck's Berries and Bees. So other than livestock, I would say, the bees, elderberries are really our primary focus for the farm. If it's not already, we've done a lot of work returning a lot of the land to the environment. So we have shallow water wetlands, and we have pollinator habitats, warm season grasses. We just planted 700 trees on slope management. It goes on and on. So right now, I got to a point on the farm where it was like a turning point where I was no longer doing maintenance and cleanup. I was actually going to start being able to produce something, and this is just fantastic. I love everything about it. I mean, looking at you guys and seeing how interested you are in it makes me more interested in it. So I'm chomping at the bit for next year to grow more, to do this, that. Went and got we got a wood chipper, so we could chip our own mulch, and so everything about it is fun, and the learning process is great. And then, of course, having somebody who knows a lot more about it than I do is invaluable. So we're going to stick with elderberries and do some, blueberries on the side, raspberries on the side. But elderberries seem like, for the effort, they produce so much more than any other thing that we're thinking of, at least.
So while you've got the mic, and this will be for everybody, if y'all could you describe any unexpected challenges with this alley cropping specific project, whatever that happens to be, layout, crop combinations, maintenance, just something? Is there something that sticks out to you as that was a challenge for you?
I think our biggest challenge was water, quite honestly. We had a dry spell, and our soil's a clay on that area. We have two 300-gallon water tanks, and then I have a 275-gallon tank I put in the back of a truck. I drive it out to our pond a quarter mile away. I fill it up, bring it back over. So I got to do that, and if it's dry, I've got to do that at least once or twice a week. Getting the watering system down, checking everything. That was my biggest challenge, I guess, and my most time-consuming thing was making sure everything's getting watered properly. The weeds, even though I've only cut little 6-inch holes, young elderberries do not do well with weeds at all. They compete for the same nutrients in the same level of the soil. So I would say watering, making sure you're not over-watering, and weeding. Those are the biggest things. I don't care how much mulch you add, you're still gonna get it. You're still going to get a variety of weeds, and of course they're going to be rooted deep. So just learning that, spending time on your knees, having fun. We have chickens, and if my dogs weren't so bad, I would put the chickens in with them. But we haven't had any pressure. We have a 2-string electric fence and big dogs that keep the deer away. So luckily we don't have that pressure to contend with. So I don't know. It's going really well. Everything's working out really well.
Sure.
Wind and landscaping fabric I knew it was probably going to be a challenge, and so we put in our staples. I had a lot of high tensile fence that was already rolled up, and so I made my own staples. And we were putting them in on 10-foot spacing. Wind came, rolled up all of our landscaping fabric with our drip irrigation and put it over it. We did that around 3 times before. Just buy your staples, buy galvanized staples, and put them at least on the outside perimeter, 3 or 4 foot spacing. Also get you the poly sandbags, fill them with rock or whatever, put those around the perimeter as well. Definitely want to shingle it against your prevailing wind to where when the wind gets under a piece. Also, if you lay your fabric out, go ahead and get your holes in it as soon as you can, even if you're not going to plant for a little while, because that allows the air, if it does get under the fabric, to get out. That was our biggest one and the biggest headache. Again, the weeds, like you said, I don't care if you're just doing a 6-inch hole, you're still going to have to manage those weeds for the first year. But that was the biggest thing. Are you going to ask what we would do differently, or do you? So.
Yeah, that's one of the questions. Yeah, you can.
I would say also just thinking about your alley. You're going to be harvesting your elderflower and your elderberries. We should have thought more about the growth size. I thought I did, but like I said, we're on good soils, and we had one of the Rebeckias that typically when we see in the wild is a pretty small shape. And I'm specifically talking about brown-eyed Susans, not black-eyed. So Rebeckia, I believe that's triloba. But when we put it in our soils, and this was a Kentucky genetic source seed, it got huge, and I was not able to walk between it and my elderberries. So that's something that really surprised me. Taylor?
First of all, was just like finding a big area on the farm. It's just like everything's so hilly, and just like, so like finding some kind of contiguous section to plant a hazelnut orchard, because pollination is such an issue with these hazelnuts, because these European hazelnuts, they all have the same parentage, and hazelnuts are self-incompatible, so they have to outcross, they have to pollinate each other, and all the ones that Rutgers released can't pollinate each other. So it's kind of tricky to come up with a design, especially on a not flat, very varying farm. So that was tricky. And then just, I still need to get water up there. So my plan is to tap our spring, put in a reservoir, I can't think of the word right now, basically like a 1,500 gallon tank, and then pump up to the orchard. So that's going to be a big project as well.
Because we only have a few minutes left, I'm sure if y'all have questions after, or if these folks want to stay and answer your questions, we can do that. We're going to leave the rest to you if you have questions. Do y'all have questions? Other questions for them right now? They're covering everything you want. We got a question right here.
I'm wondering if on your elderberries, if you have seen other ecologically beneficial activity other than just for your native bees. So like I noticed on mine that I got a lot of dragonfly activity that I hadn't seen before.
That's the cool thing about whenever you start attracting other insects, even if they are beneficial insects, the predators for those insects will show up as well. So like dragonflies, especially if you're not applying pesticides, right? So again, this was our first full growing season. So the other ecological benefits that I know of are really just those that are read about, and that elderberry is such an incredible companion plant with other things. And so he was the only one to hold his hand up, and I want to say this before everyone leaves. If you are the least bit interested in elderberries, please dive in and give it a shot. We need more people growing elderberries. As a producer and seller, we are the best for advocates for elderberry and the incredible health benefits that it can provide our communities, to where we can lead our communities to being healthier. There's so many awesome things that elderberry can do, and really the best advocate is folks growing it. So I highly encourage each of you to give it a shot, even if you're just growing a small plot for yourself and your own family. The next thing I want to say is we put our rows on 12-foot spacing, okay? We use 6-foot wide landscaping fabric. That seemed to work out the best. I would say that if you're looking at introducing as your alley cut flowers or any kind of flowering plant, even if you're just wanting to do seed production, I would do a cool season early crop, something like even as early as daffodils or that sort of thing, to where that crop is coming off pre-June 15th to pre-June 30th. to allow you all that room in that alley space to work on your elderberry crop. If I was to do it again, I would consider going to 18-foot spacing for them, or I would do strictly cool season stuff in my alleys.
Hey, Oaks and Brian. I've got a question for a non-farming person. My daughter takes like some kind of elderberry syrup for, immune suppression. So what are you all harvesting the berries, and what is like the end product for those?
Yeah, so just a real quick statistic, and it's very similar to U.S. produced honey. So the U.S. produces around 60% of the world's supply of elderberries. We import 90% of the elderberries that are consumed here. And so there's a huge need, a huge market for U.S. produced elderberries. Majority of the products that you find, Subacol or something like that, Sambucol, they come from Europe. They're European produced elderberries. I don't want to knock them. It's a great product. However, our American elderberries have been found not to have the precursors for cyanide that the European elderberries do. What that means is you do not have to boil our elderberries in order to consume them and reduce those precursors. So if you're not boiling it, you're retaining more of that natural nutrition that's available in the berry. So the elder flower, we will be harvesting that this year. It's known for its health benefits as well, to put in the tea. And then the elderberries is what we're using. And so we go ahead and package those freeze-dried elderberries in with organic ginger, organic cinnamon, and organic cloves into an elderberry syrup kit. That is the largest way that it's consumed, is through that. And then they just add their local raw honey to that. It makes about a quart. You take an ounce a day, so it lasts one person about a month. But you can also use those freeze-dried elderberries or fresh frozen elderberries into yogurts, into muffins, and anything else you would use a berry for.
Brian, you have anything to add to that? Like what your long-term, goal is for your elderberries?
No, but the only way to say it is, when you read, it's so vast. I found a funny thing when I read elderberry books, so as I go place to place, here's my book, and inevitably somebody will stop and talk to me about elderberries, what they do with elderberries, how they consume them, how much they love them. So, like he's saying, there's so much need for us to produce our own that I think it's, you say like the Wild West, but it's like there's going to be a lot of things coming up, and I think you can probably put it into, most things. I mean, if you read about them, you'll find, every part of the plant, from making flutes to making poultices to, drinking it, will be at one point a product. And like Oaks, I do bees as well, and honey. And so for me, I would like to incorporate those two things together in some way.
So nobody's kicking you out of the room, but to end this up, I want to ask each of you 30 seconds, just generally alley cropping, what do they need to know to get started?
Call him. But really, I mean, define what you have first. Your space and your time. What you can do, and then invest in as much time as you can in reading about them, talking to people who grow them or people who are interested, or producers. They love talking about elderberries. Get as much information as you can before you step into it, so you feel like you're not by yourself or going in blind. And with row cropping, I mean, really, the sky's the limit. They ask us what we want, and it just so happened that where we are, there's another nonprofit that will actually buy all of our produce from us and sell it. They combine it with a lot of other farmers, and they get a better price. So that was a huge reason that we were going with the pumpkins and the squash. And I can see why somebody would do cut flowers or hazelnuts. I never thought of that at all, but it's fascinating. So I think, the sky's the limit of what you want to do. It's just a matter of make sure you put enough space between things. Like I said, that is huge because it doesn't look like anything when the plants are 1 foot tall, but it's going to get big fast and it's going to be a lot of work.
I think what I would say is that, I assume a lot of you all are from Kentucky or this region, and the knowledge around tree crops is pretty limited. And of course, with alley cropping, you're going to be planting trees. So think about joining like the Kentucky Nut Growers Association. It's these really old guys who've been growing nut trees for a long time, and they're so excited that someone who's younger than them is excited to listen to them and talk to them. Or join the Northern Nut Growers Association or the North American Fruit Explorers, because really our tree crop industry east of the Mississippi has been annihilated since like World War II. And we really don't have the genetic diversity we used to have. And I'm really just think it's really important, the genetics that you pick, whether you're doing black locust or honey locust or elderberry or hazelnuts, like the selection of genetics is just so important for your tree crops. So join some of those groups and get that knowledge, because those people are super generous. I've received so many cuttings and scionwood for free, seeds for free, just a lot of free exchange and lots of knowledge exchange. So join those kind of groups.
So if you were in David's alley cropping presentation right before this one, and if you were in there, you heard him say this, and me coming from an engineer's perspective, before you tackle anything, you're going to grow something, look at your boundary conditions. What is my soils and my climate already suitable for? And then from there, I would say we're all farmers in here interested in farming. You have to be passionate about what you're producing, or it's not going to work, because whenever things go wrong or go bad, which they are, or you're having to put in all those extra hours, you won't do it unless you are passionate. So look at your boundary conditions, knock it down. My climate, my soils, what is going to grow well here? And then from that, what can I be passionate about? And from there, how much time am I going to be able to do? Is this feasible? And then lastly, I would say market to look at, because I really feel like if it's something you could be passionate about, you will be able to develop a market for that. Is it as big a market as you want? No, probably not to begin with. But if you're passionate about it, others can be passionate about it as well. Elderberries, I think, will always stay small scale. I mentioned the big market potential, and that a lot of times lends itself well to a large corporation or a lot of money putting a lot of it into production and knocking the small guy out. That isn't practical right now with elderberries. They do not have the genetics to where it produces at a point to where it can be harvested mechanically. They've been trying it for years. It's not happening. It's going to stay small scale because of the labor requirement.
That just changed everything for us. We contacted the USDA, NRCS, the local extension offices, and there's just such a wealth of knowledge, and they give you money, which is huge. I mean, really, there's not a single thing I do on my farm that I'm not paid to do. And I mean, it's not chump change, so you can go from anything from, your whole watering systems, drainage systems. I mean, the sky's the limit. They just contacted us a couple days ago to offer us a 90-foot high tunnel for free. So, so you may go, oh, I don't have the capital to get started. Well, these people not only provide you with the capital, they'll also provide you with the expertise. They come out to your farm, they test your soil, they talk to you about your needs, what will work. And it's just, they're begging to give you the money. I mean, really. So that's my 2 cents on that. I mean, it's not a big process to do. It's like a 2-page application. And when you get it, it's kind of amazing what you end up getting paid to do things on your farm that you want to do in such a way that you're sure that they're going to be beneficial to your farm. So we just finished a 3-year contract. somewhere around $50,000 that they gave us to, they built us a pond, pollinator habitats for them through the grasses. Like I said, 700 trees for slope management. It goes on and on. So it will fit into these types of things as well. And it's way easier than you think. Of course, it's a little frustrating because it's the government, but once you get on track, it takes a little bit of that burden off your back.
Let's give them a hand. Thank you very much.